a beautiful sound, echoing as it has for over a century in this mountain valley, carved by the Rio de Las Animas, the River of Souls. While whistles have been heard in Durango for nearly a century and a half, the one that speaks to our souls today is of a younger variety. While these younger ones may be the newest boilers to ever dance across the diminutive rails of the Denver and Rio Grande's narrow gauge empire, today these locomotives have eclipsed the century mark. For their initial service, these brutes never ventured northward into the heart of the silvery San Juans. Instead, they worked on the main line from Chama and the narrowed, once broad gauge rails of the Red Apple line into Farmington. When these two spokes radiating out of the narrow gauge hub in Durango were finally lost forever, the mournful voice of the K-36 fell silent along the Animas. Only 13 years later did it return, when the new Durango and Silverton took over the lone remaining remnant of the Grande's San Juan Empire, as the Cumbres and Toltec was quickly sold off in 1970. Returned to service in August of 1981, the 481 had been the lone K-36 left by the Denver and Rio Grande Western in December of 1968. Hauled in on the final through train, its boiler was left cold after a quick shopping in the railroad's Alamosa shops before their demise. Later imports to the isolated line included the 480, brought back into service in 1985 after being hauled over Wolf Creek Pass on the Great Divide and then trucked on down the other side. 482 was revived in 1992 after sitting forlorn with the Cumbres and Toltec until the previous year when it was traded for the then operable, larger 497. Finally, the 486, with the longest slumber, returned to service in 1999 after years on display 1,000 feet above the Arkansas River and the original Denver and Rio Grande main line, perched on the edge of the abyss of the Royal Gorge. Today, we're transported back nearly a century as the skilled shop forces in Durango have taken the 480 to its 1930s appearance, featuring a pilot deck mounted toolbox, train indicator boards, smaller numbers and lettering all around, the Rio Grande Shield Herald, and even wood extension boards for the coal bunker. Join us on this journey to yesteryear as we imagine a period mixed train on the Silverton branch, guided by this class of locomotive that never operated here during this era. We begin at the depot in Durango, where our conductor Kyla and Brakeman Lane hook up the 480 with its golden yellow coaches, caboose 0540, and an assemblage of freight cars, including a load of vintage Ford tractors to help dress up one of our flat cars. Directly on the drawbar of the 480 is the 0470 water cistern, built for the Uinta Railway. It was used to fill remote water supplies along the line, and today is used for auxiliary water during photo specials such as this to help increase availability for run-bys. We first catch the 480 leaving out of Durango under the ever-brightening October skies as it crosses the sleepy streets at Main and later at 32nd Street as it heads into the light in the Hermosa Valley. The special's first stop this morning is the water tank at Hermosa. With the wooden tank long out of service but cosmetically restored, its duties are taken up by the tank car, long ago removed from the rails and raised to provide the gravity to quickly load the tank of the 480. After the locomotive cistern is filled, the 0470 is pulled up to the spout to be filled. With the hatch just too far forward, our conductor helps up to help our fireman, Brock, with the filling. With the tanks topped off, the 480 crosses over US Highway 550 and begins to dig into the ever-steepening grade of Hermosa Hill. From here to Rockwood, the train will attack some of the longest continuous grades on the line to avoid some of the gnarliest portions of the Animas Canyon between the High Line and Baker's Bridge. At Rockwood, we leave the roads behind and jump aboard, as it's the only way to get proper scenes along the line. And unlike Robert Redford in 1969's Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid jumping aboard atop this train in the cut to our back, today the 480 slows to pick up its contingent of passengers. Not far past Rockwood, we get off at the world-famous Horseshoe Curve on the High Line, one of the most photographed locations in all of railroading. But unlike the thousands of photos taken here every day along this stretch, we'll be trackside instead of on the train. The Tacoma High Bridge sits just south of the hydroelectric plant. Outfitted with parts originally meant for and shipped in boxes labeled for the Washington City, the generating station also lends its name to this span, the highest on the line. We're starting at river level, where the 480 swaps back to the eastern bank of the river, after navigating the shelf track of the High Line that reaches some 200 feet in places above the water. Waving our white flags denoting we're an extra train movement means we have to give precedence to timetable trains according to the rule book. And today is no exception. Today we catch a dead to rights on time train 463, led by sister K-36 number 482, as it lugs its train up the canyon at capacity, 12 fully loaded cars on its tender draw. With the 463 heading up the canyon, we take back to the main once more and head up the draw of the canyon. Of course, to run a steam locomotive, you're going to need water. And so, we pull into the stop at Tank Creek to top off once again. Cement wall, an outcome of the disastrous 1970 Labor Day flood, is a common stop on these trips, and today's event participants once more detrain for the breathtaking sights along the vertical igneous rock wall above. Just past Tefft, we're at the crib wall to help protect the line from the ever-relentless Animas. At the long-ago abandoned ghost town of Needleton, once the stop for many a prospective miner, we detrain where hikers now do for their hike into the Chicago Basin, Winnemucca Wilderness, and the Needle Peaks in search of solitude and views beyond compare. While we would like to join along, we'll stay near the tracks where the 480 pounds up the grade beneath the prow of Mountain View Crest. Below the Y and siding of Elk Park, we're at the 4th crossing of the Animas since Durango, and the first one bypassed. Originally spanned by the metal and wood truss bridges in the background, this deck girder bridge was constructed here in the mid-1960s, after the piers of the original bridge could no longer safely support the weight of the trains. Elk Park, the last wide spot in the canyon before entering Baker's Park 5 miles ahead, finds us in the siding around the corner as we welcome train 464 back from Silverton as it drops off its lone passenger ticketed to this remote flag stop. Needless to say, the hunter here was quite perplexed to get off and find nearly every camera trained on his move getting off the southbound train. Again on the move, we're near Whitehead Gulch, where a new location has been scouted out for a stop, with a view of the towering needles reaching into the fluctuating skies. With the ever-lengthening shadows in the canyon, it's time to head into Baker's Park and the end of the line. While some write off the Silverton as a basic tourist line, it's anything but. No, Durango and Silverton is run like any real railroad. One thing that is the same is the need for authority to occupy the main track. With only one track and 4 more trains rolling simultaneously, sometimes within mere miles of each other, the dispatcher is busy all day on this train orchestrating movements. With our last run-by finish, Kyla is seen in caboose 0540 conversing with the DS in the Durango Tower, changing her authority to hold the main track from the work between, letting the train move freely back and forth between a set of designated points into a directional one, meaning we may only steam northward.
Xbox 4, work between Cascade Canyon and Milepost 479. Xbox 15, flight protection not required.
With our first day in the books, 480 slinks away towards the depot and the scale track, where she and her train will await the dawn to bring the day back tomorrow. At the scale track, the morning hostling crew has revived the 480 from her overnight slumber. Bobby has taken his place in the right-hand seat as the steel lungs of the mighty K breathe life into the brake reservoirs in the flock of cars on her drawbar. Turned on the Silverton Y, the 480 backs onto the line's version of street running at 12th Street, where the daily trains stop to load and unload their passengers of today. Coming off this track gives us a wonderful scene of the train departing under the massif of Kendall Mountain as we begin our southbound journey. At the southernmost point of Baker's Park, we're at one of the line's newest pieces of infrastructure, the northernmost crossing of the Animas. Built in the winter of 2023 into 2024, this steel girder bridge now carries the line over the river, as the out-of-service bridge sits in its shadow to the west. Shortly after this video was shot, the railroad finished removing the original bridge, leaving only the new one to remain. At the Colorado Trail, the sinuous trail winding its way from Durango to Denver passes over the line just north of Elk Park, where we find this vibrant pond along the right-of-way. We pause here for both multiple run-bys and to clear for daily train 463, led by double-heading 473 and 476. One traditional photo opportunity on these trips is the crew shot, where all involved pause to be recorded in posterity, whether it be on pixels with today's digital cameras, or even all sorts of analog film. Today, we're at the Needleton tank, where like Hermosa, the traditional water tank no longer functions, and was replaced by the Rio Grande in the 1970s, with a tank car body hoisted on a hill above the rails. Between Needleton and Tefft, we're below the towering needles piercing the sky at Goblin Fire, where 480 continues its southward journey to keep ahead of Train 464. Tefft Bridge, just north of Cascade and deep in the canyon below Purgatory Flats in the ski area of the same name, is the middlemost crossing of the Animas. From one crossing of the Animas to the next, we're back at the Tacoma High Bridge, this time on the opposing bank, high above the churning waters. It may still be relatively early in the afternoon, but high cliff faces here have already left us in shadow. Back into the light, 480 rounds the horn onto the world-famous horseshoe curve of the Highland as it traipses along the narrow ledge carved into this face 144 years old. Of course, the time has come once again to clear for daily train 464 as it rolls along on its southward journey towards Durango. Behind us, 480 has rolled into the siding at Rockwood to clear, but before 476 can bring the 464 up from Tacoma, we are treated to a show of the Helper 473's whistle, brought on by its engineer John Walden, as it travels by itself, piercing the cuts chiseled to allow the line to escape the canyon. And so, with the 476 lugging its train up the grade of Rockwood, we are brought back into the modern era, ending our journey to this parallel timeline, where the Rio Grande brought modern K-36's through the gates of the Rockwood Cut and into the canyon of the Rio de Las Animas.
Hey, does anybody want coffee? Who wants coffee? Hey.
Great, yes, yes, yes. No, 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 it's not working. You go change. There you go.
You thought the video was over? It is. But if you haven't already, make sure you click like and subscribe. And that way you can get more content like this delivered right to you. And if you haven't already, check out another one of these videos here before you leave. I'd like to thank you for watching. I'm Big Deal.